Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our second Summer 2020 Executive Speaker Series event. My name is Dr. Nicole Coppell, and I'm the MBA Director. As many of you know, our long-running and very popular MBA Speaker Series went virtual last month with a great presentation by Helene Becker, Senior Analyst for the airline industry and Managing Director at Cohen. Given the many sacrifices we have all experienced as a result of the pandemic, we did not want to miss out on hearing from senior industry specialists whose stories and advice are so invaluable. Therefore, we decided to expand our bi-semester presentations to monthly events that you can join from the comfort of your homes. In our audience tonight, in addition to MBA and other School of Business students, we have prospective students, alumni, faculty, staff, and members of our Feliciano School of Business Advisory Board. I'm very pleased that our newly named Dean, Dr. Kimberly Hollister, has also joined us. The format of this evening session will be a presentation by Mr. Ori Eisen, followed by a Q&A session facilitated by our Associate Dean, Dr. Betsy Rossini. Thank you to everyone who provided questions for Ori in advance, and we invite you to enter additional questions using the Q&A feature found on the bottom of your Zoom screen. We'll do our best to have Ori answer as many of your questions as time permits. This has been a team effort on behalf of our MBA and Graduate Programs Office staff, Dean's Office, Development Office, Alumni Relations, and the FBUS technical team. And I want to thank everyone for their contributions. At this point, I have the honor of introducing my colleague, Dr. Rich Peterson, professor in our Information and Business Analytics Department, who will be introducing his former student and esteemed alum, Mr. Ori Eisen, who is tonight's featured speaker. Thank you. Rich? Dr. Peterson, you're muted. You need to unmute and start again.
Oh, sorry. Maybe it's all the Zoom meetings that I couldn't figure out how to unzoom. But when I was asked to introduce Ori to you, a video started in my head. And in this video, Ori was sitting at a coffee shop he owns in Scottsdale, Arizona. Of course, every entrepreneur owns a coffee shop. I could see he was multitasking, worrying about being a good father and husband, worrying about his coffee shop, reflecting on the outcomes of his philanthropy, and simultaneously strategizing about growing his current venture and starting number 4. As I took a closer look at Ori, I saw a teenager immigrant from Israel, an extended family living together in Clifton, a young man polishing his English in Bergen Community College, and a student of mine in an information technology class. I guess I looked a little younger then. Looking even closer, I saw Ori in a growing focus on cybersecurity. First at Bank of America, where he focused on wire fraud. Then at eWire MoneyCom, his first startup, which preceded PayPal and enabled people to move money using the internet. After selling that company, he joined VeriSign as a head of fraud. I kind of assumed that he was reducing it and not producing it. And he later left there to join American Express as worldwide fraud director to tackle the problem on a global scale. In 2004, he had this great idea of finding out what the bad guys are really like. And so he hooked up with a guy who is known for forgery and embezzlement, a fellow by the name of Frank Abagnale, whose notorious bank fraud schemes were chronicled in the movie Catch Me If You Can. Ori started 41st Parameter, an online fraud prevention and detection platform for financial institutions and e-commerce. He sold that company in 2013 to Experian. That's when he got into coffee. As the video winds down, I see Ori unfazed by his stature as a leading expert in financial security, cybersecurity, with more than 24 cybersecurity patents. His newest venture, Trusona, offers cloud-based identity proofing that relies on a multi-factor login, including Touch ID and other features to prevent fraud. He is leading the no password revolution around the world. Finally, as the video ended, I saw you as our MBA students walking in Ori's footsteps, and I said, why not? It is my great pleasure to introduce to you Ori Eisen.
Thank you so much. I'll make sure that you can hear me. I am not on mute, and I'll share my screen real quickly. All right, can you all see my screen in presentation mode? I need one nod. Can you guys see it? Roger, just making sure before I begin.
Yes, you're good.
Fantastic. Thank you, everybody. I'm honored to be here beyond words. I am an alum of Montclair, as you can see by this fancy shirt. And when I was asked to speak, I couldn't think of a better thing to do, because I wish I would get some of this advice 20 years ago when I was in school. I want to make this really interactive today, kind of say things the way they are, keep it real, keep it funny, and at the end, be open to any questions you might have. And if we run out of time, you can always email me directly and ask any questions. The presentation I'm going to share with you today is very timely because of the pandemic. It would make a lot of sense even if we didn't take this presentation at home and I would be in person with you in class, because the world simply has changed from 20 years ago. But what I'm truly trying to convey here is, are you really intending to succeed? And it's a double entendre, of course, as in, are you intentionally aiming for success as opposed to waiting for it to simply happen? I'll start with this slide, which I usually start my cybersecurity talks with. This slide is 25 years old. It was in the New Yorker by Paul Steiner. And unfortunately, it's still true today. On the internet, we just don't know who's on the other end. As Dr. P mentioned, I have a company today called Trusona, which is a fusion of true and persona put together. And what I aim to do with it is to rid the world of passwords. A little bit about me. It is true, I started ewiremoney.com. But there is one part about my story that may not be known, so I brought a prop today to show you. When I was 18, I invented this product. It's called the Grab It. You probably have seen it in many places. It is a Velcro type thing that allows you to put cables together and keep them organized. In my youth, I worked in a sound studio and had to deal with a lot of cables, and I hated when they got all over the place. So the saying, the need is the mother of all invention, is true. So that was my first invention when I was 18 years old. But when I came to the States, I did my first real startup. As Dr. P said, a year before of PayPal, I started moving money on the internet in 1998. I've learned a lot about fraud, which led me to found 41st Parameter. It was acquired by Experian in 2013. And today, in my fourth startup, Trusona, I'm trying to get rid of passwords. I do own a coffee shop. I call that my hobby. I wish on all of you to have a fun hobby like that one day. My corporate career spans a Bank of America, VeriSign, and American Express. I jokingly say I have a checkered past. I work at a corporate job and then a startup and then a corporate job and then a startup. And you can only imagine now I'm on my startup phase of my being on and off. I am in cybersecurity. I do a lot of work volunteering in organizations like Thorn, helping to fight child pornography online. And in my spare time, I also run a charity called ball2all.org. I'm going to change my monitor. I said I brought props. I mean it. As you can see behind me, there's a few soccer balls. I have a charity that gives them all over the world for kids who can't afford one, because I believe we should not only give people food and shelter, we should also give them something fun to do, so kids will grow up to be happy members of society. And in 1996, as you heard, I graduated from Montclair. I had a double major in marketing and in MIS, my two passions in life, which led me to my journey. So how did I get here? I jokingly will say that I did not get here by attending an Ivy League school. As an immigrant to the US, I don't know if you know, international students pay double the tuition. So I had to find a school that I could still afford by paying double. So I started in Montclair, in the Bergen Community College, as you heard from my associate, and then moved to Montclair, where I graduated. I was not born into this. I did not take any shortcuts. Nothing was ever handed to me. And really what you'll see in this presentation is, when do you take opportunities or create opportunities is the key to getting to where you want to go. So the first topic is the intentionality of success. So not just waiting for it to happen, but creating very specific acts that will help you get where you want to go. Here are some examples. I have the slide from the movie because the truth is not easy to hear, because it's not something that is easy to talk about. Taking shortcuts is something you should never do if you want to get ahead. But there's also other things that you should probably think about as you begin your career in the real world, such as, I've never asked for a raise. And in my entire career, in any job I had, whether I had investors behind me or just a corporate job, I believe that if I'll work hard enough and I'll show the value, I will not have to ever ask for it. And while it's subtle, and maybe in some points in our culture, people are trained to ask for raises or make the point, I will leave unless I get paid more. That's one life lesson that I would definitely share, because you create your fortune by delivering value, and then things just happen to you. But just by asking for it may not be how you get ahead. In 1967, a great movie came out called The Graduate. If you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend it. One famous line in there is Dustin Hoffman, who's a college graduate, trying to kind of find his way in life. And this father figure shows up at a party and says, I have one word for you. And the one word is plastics. Very famous line from the movie. I am not going to suggest you go into plastics. In 2020, I would suggest you work on your business relationships. That's one word I could suggest you work on, is that, because I can see that the very way we live our lives are robbing us from creating the relationships that will create the intentionality of success. Let me explain what I mean. I got money from the largest VC in the world. Their name is Kleiner Perkins. In fact, I got money from them twice, which is very rare. When you go through the pitch process and they want to recruit you as a founder, they would tell you the following line: everybody has VC money, everybody has venture capital money, but we have not just venture capital, we have relationship capital. As in, if you open the speed dial of some of the partners in the firm, they can open doors anywhere you can imagine, and that you can't buy. What do I mean by that? How we learn has changed, and especially for your generation, I can't even imagine how different it must be. If you went to school 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 60 years ago, and you wanted to learn something new at work, the most common way was to ask an expert or an SME, a subject matter expert, to teach you. And by the mere fact that you were mentored or you had this relationship and you learned from somebody, inadvertently, you've also built a personal relationship with that person. There, I said it. Today, we as a society, including myself, I'd rather get a text from somebody than to get a phone call. There, I'm saying it the way it is. Let alone asking for somebody to teach me if I think I can learn it on a YouTube video. And if you're laughing to yourself right now or smirking, good, that means it's true. YouTube videos will not call you though when an opportunity arises. And again, even if it's against the grain and even if it's not what we're used to or what's easy, I would say that by reducing our personal interactions and the relationship at work by asking people to mentor, you're also inadvertently reducing your relationship capital or the surface area for success. Why? Because if before a colleague knew that you're interested in machine learning or AI or marketing or you name it, if they would ever in their course of business hear of an opportunity, whether in their department or another department or someplace else, they can call you and say, hey, I know you're interested in XYZ. I've heard about this. Maybe you can go apply there, or maybe this is for you. But if we're reducing everything we learn to watching YouTube or doing it on ourselves, I'm afraid they will never call us with a job offer. So now we have COVID. So you can say, Ori, I heard you, that makes sense, but I'm not going to an office anymore. So how am I going to do that? Even if I wanted to adopt your advice, how am I going to do it if I'm working from home or if I'm just interning from home? Which is a great, great question. I don't have all the answers, but I'll say this. If I were you and I would be living now and trying to intentionally create success, I would intentionally aim for what I really want to become. I would still ask somebody to mentor me. And I would use video conference as opposed to just a phone call or just text or just emails. Again, with the intentionality to build relationships that can help catapult you to the next level. Okay, here's the second thing I wish someone told me 20 years ago. It's not intuitive. I've learned it the hard way, and I'd love to share it with you. The lesson could be summed by saying, be important, not essential. What does that mean? If I'll ask by a show of hands, and let me show you, I'm now going to use the Zoom feature to raise my hand. You could see that you can raise your hand. I don't know if you can see your Zoom panel. Here, let me go to reaction, and I can raise my hand. If you don't mind, let's try and do this. Everybody here who can raise their hand, can you do that, please? Who wants a promotion so we can see how many people want one? I'll wait. So I assume most of you have raised your hand. But I'll ask you this question. Can you be promoted? Not if you want one, but can you be promoted? What does that mean? If you're in any technical field, marketing field, even sales field, and you're responsible for something for a company, and you have not documented what you do so anyone can do it, my hint to you would be you cannot be promoted because only you know how to do something. A common way to undo that is write an SOP, a standard operating procedure, such that if you go on vacation or if you are promoted or you just leave, someone else can pick up the process and do it. Here's my next question about can you be promoted? Did you write the KPIs, the key performance indicators of what it is you're working on? So if you're in sales, how many leads did we get this week compared to how much money we spent on it? If you're in MIS, how many transactions have gone through the system, uptime, and so forth? If you did not set up the key performance indicators and the management information systems, the MIS, to measure it and report it so anyone can do it, that means only you can do it. So how can I ever promote you? How can I move you to another department or upwards if only you can do something? There, I said it. I can't. And the third is a very common occurrence, especially when we're young, including myself. If you wrote some code, if you built a process, if you did something, let's just say you are the printer person for the company. You're the, oh, he knows how to make, or she knows how to make videos, right? And everybody knows that this is your expertise, but no one else can do it other than you. Inadvertently, you can block your success, or you can keep stagnant because no one can move you upward or sideways, because only you can do that. So I'd highly encourage you to think about being important to the company, but don't be essential, because essential people cannot be promoted. I'll finish this point by saying it's not intuitive to think about it, but if you want to get ahead, you first have to think about letting go of your current job. And I know most of us don't come to work thinking, how do I get rid of my job? Because we want to be gainfully employed and we don't want to have the fear of not having a job. I totally get that. But you will not get ahead if you will hold on all the time to what you have. So you should be important to the team or the organization, absolutely. But don't become so essential in one department or area, so you'll get stuck there by holding on. My last slide before we start the Q&A is this. I am now 20 years both learning about people and organizations and how life is, and I can tell you the hardest thing to do is to take a promotion in a field that is new to you, because we don't like to hear no. We don't like to hear that we suck at something. That's a technical term, look it up. We don't like to get negative reactions. And that sometimes is holding us back from really spreading our wings. For example, if I would only stick to what I've learned at MSU, let's just say MIS for the sake of example, I would be the head of MIS at some bank right now, because that is what I've cornered myself or pigeonholed myself to do. But if I would never dabble in marketing or in sales or in other areas, I would never realize that I could become a CEO of a company, or I could do other things, because I would only think of myself as one thing. And that doesn't mean every year you need to pick a new line of work just to be brave. But it does mean that if you have an inkling, if you have a wish, if you think you'll be successful doing something, aim your life journey towards it and be brave enough to suck at it for a while as a stepping stone for success. What I'll do now is I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to let the presenter change what we're going to see, and we'll open it up for Q&A.
Thank you, Ori. You've given us so much to think about. Some of it counterintuitive, some of it obvious, but what we never think about, and we should. We have a lot of questions for you tonight, so I'm just going to get started. First question is, what sectors of the economy do you see as having potential for growth and opportunity in the next 5 years?
Okay, I'll answer it with COVID and without, because this question really depends. In Chinese, there's a word that says that crisis, the same word for crisis is the word for opportunity. And I think we can learn something from that. Clearly, if you're running a movie theater these days, you are in trouble, because the main source of revenue that relied on the notion that people will come to the theater is simply not happening. So if you're only thinking about that and you're pigeonholing yourself there, you might be worried about your future in the next 5 years. However, I would look at the same thing as an opportunity to do something else with the space. If you look at companies like Zoom before COVID, they were just, growing at a normal rate. If you look at what COVID did to them, is the best thing that could ever happen to a company, right? Gave them what's called a compelling event to now sell and go from 50 million users to 300 million users in a matter of 2 weeks. So in every crisis, try to think if you have also an opportunity. It is way easier for you guys as MBA students because you're at the beginning of your journey. Somebody who's known to be, I don't know, a projectionist for 30 years is just hard to change course, even though I would highly suggest move to the digital side of consumption. Go do the same thing you love, but just interpolate it differently in a world where we have this pandemic. But you can look at the market and see what are the growth areas, such as machine learning and AI clearly will continue growing. If you ever thought about going into the pharmaceutical space, wink, wink, I think there's going to be amazing stuff happening there. If you thought about CRISPR as a company that analyzes DNA for new, that would be an amazing new field of discovery that is just starting now. So again, if we go back to the 1967 movie, the one word is plastics. There's probably a few words. Now, I'm not going to say cybersecurity because that's what I do in every presentation. I change it to relationship here. But cybersecurity is an amazing field. We have fewer people needed than we really need in the world. So if you're into that, go study that. That's a growth area. And the rest are just pockets of things that are maybe are too early, but I will say quantum computing in the next 10 years will definitely become more of a thing. We see other things in blockchain. That technology might be too early now, but in 5 years will be more acceptable. So try to read the tea leaves of what you think will be successful 5 years from now, especially with the lens of COVID. And I assure you, there's plenty of growth areas, even if most things we're used to could look like they're shrinking.
Okay, thank you. Next question. What advice would you give to students who want to start their own company?
Don't do it. Okay. What should I say? I have a blog. It's called orieisen.com. So literally my name and last name.com. On it, there's a startup advice page where I give the no sugar-coated advice on what does it really mean to start a company. And out of all the blog posts, let me give you the one sentence because I believe that's the beginning and the end. There's a fable about a Buddhist that wanted to know the meaning of life. And there he goes to his teacher. So imagine it's Dr. P here and say, hey, what's the meaning of life? And the teacher says, come with me to the water, to the river, and I'll explain it to you. So the teacher goes into the river and the student goes to the river and the teacher puts his head into the water where the student cannot breathe. And there's a struggle. And after about a minute, the teacher removes the hand and the student can take the head off the water and they gasp and they can breathe for the first time again. And they're like, what are you doing? You're trying to kill me. What is this? And the teacher simply says, hey, you came to me and you wanted to know the meaning of life, right? And the student says, yes. And then the teacher says, tell me, when you were underwater and you couldn't breathe, what were you thinking about? Like, what went through your mind? And the student says, what do you mean? I could only think of one thing, which is how much I want to breathe again. And then the teacher says, when you want to know the meaning of life, as bad as you wanted to breathe, you will. And I'll say it to every entrepreneur. If you want to succeed in business as much as that person wanted to breathe, you will. There is nothing else I can say. Starting a company is hard. It is against reason because 9 out of 10 companies fail. You don't have customers, you don't have money, you don't have anything. So everything is against you. So only if you believe in the mission, only when you believe in it as much as you want to breathe, you actually have a shot of succeeding in anything. And it could be a lemonade stand, a theater, or building Tesla again, right? It doesn't matter what you set your mind to do. But if you don't want it bad enough, which is really the issue, don't start it. It's not for everybody. I'm not going to sugarcoat that.
Great. Next question. Thinking about your own career path, can you give an example of a decision or a fork in the road that had you taken the other fork, your trajectory would have been completely different?
Absolutely. Happened many times. When I think of my life backwards, I always wonder, hey, if I didn't go to work that day and didn't see that thing, and it wouldn't make me think, what would I have become? And if you think about your own life, you'll see you're a chain reaction of all the things that happened to you that made you come to this meeting today. Think about it. Had you not gone to MSU, right? I'm sure at one point you thought about going to other schools. You would not start a journey that would end up in this very meeting. Wow. That's deep, right? It's the butterfly effect. So I had many of them, probably like every person. I think the main ones are really relating to seeing the problem that I saw in the world, which is mainly cybercrime and how easy it is to steal money from banks. And I could have just observed it like most people, read about it in the paper. I decided to do something about it. And I think had I not done that, I would probably be doing something very different, like work in an ad agency or something completely not related to what I'm doing today.
Great. Here, this is another question about life choices. Says family seems important to you. How do you balance work time and personal time?
Again, point to my blog. It's one of the most contested questions I get everywhere, especially from the founder community, because they constantly think that the business comes ahead. Again, it goes with my other advice, right? Do you really want to succeed? But if you really peel the onion, you'll see that family has to come first. And let me explain why. If you go to work, either as an employee or as the owner, and you're thinking about your child who's sick, for example, or you're feeling about something else that is kind of gnawing at you, you really are not at work, are you? So unless you have a stable base to come back to, which is kind of your stronghold, it's very difficult to go do other hard things such as succeed in business. So with our own employees at every company I had, including our house rules here in Trusona that you can read online, we believe that family has to come first. Otherwise, in those hard days, and there will be a lot of hard days if you start your own company, you will not have something to draw energy from. You will be broke, both physically, emotionally, financially, and with the relationship capital we talked about. I believe that you must have that to succeed. There's no other way. A lot of people succeed in business and they lose their families. I see it every single place I go. But if you ask those people what is their single biggest regret, is that they did not go to the kids' concert, that they did not pay attention to their spouse when they really needed them, citing, oh, I have work to do, as if that's the excuse for everything. But you have to prioritize life balance. Otherwise, you will end up in the hospital. I write a lot about it, and I know it's a contested subject, especially in the United States. So I urge you to read some of those writings and have a conversation about it. But you must find balance.
Great. Some other questions about Trusona. First question is, how would you describe Trusona's organizational culture? You're a small company, but every company has a culture.
Yeah, I brought a prop for that. Thank you for whoever asked it. It's a slide whistle. Let me play it for you. There. When we have good news at Trusona, everybody can understand the sound. When we lose a deal, they understand this sound. There. I can send you, or you can read on my blog, the culture or our house rules, such as family first, the fact that we speak about things the way they are. And having fun is a big, big part of the journey. It's going to be hard enough. We're going to have competitors saying things we don't like. We're going to have analysts writing things we don't agree with. We're going to lose deals. There's so many things that could put you down in business. But if you don't keep a positive attitude and know that with more effort, another day can bring great things, teams just start fighting with each other and it becomes very unpleasant. So our culture is all about supporting, putting in a hard work, because there's no other way to succeed without it. And most importantly, having fun in the process. Otherwise, teams turn against each other and it's almost like cancer, right? When the body attacks itself, there is no success there, no matter who are your investors and what market you're in. We've seen it time and again. So the culture is all about having a team, because I know the saying sounds silly, but teamwork makes the dream work.
Great. That's great. A question about the environment that you're working in. Is the U.S. government supportive of the efforts of companies like Trusona to change how we protect data and our privacy?
Great question. I would say the government has some influence, but it is not what I wake up in the morning worrying about. Let me explain. I want to get passwords out of our daily interactions, and that's what I do every day. The government is not going to be in the way and say, no, no, you must keep passwords, right? That is not what's going to happen. So the real challenge and effort is to convince every CEO of the Fortune 2000s that they need to get rid of passwords. That is hard enough, even if the government was for it or against it. So yeah, it's on my radar. It's on the other edge of what could happen. But I think most businesses can be super successful without worrying about what the government will do, because they have some effect, but it's not necessarily on the daily operations of what we do. So if you're a CEO, you can either listen to advice and really secure your networks, whether the government told you to do it or not, or you can not listen to it and be exposed and even pay a fine later, right? Whether they told you to do it or not. So I just want to say, yeah, the government is there, but that is not the main reason for what we do or don't do on a daily basis.
And outside of government, how do you see the cybersecurity industry changing in the next few years?
That's a great, great question. I first think things will get worse before they get better. I don't like saying it, but it is what it is. If you read the newspapers like I do, about 10 years ago, we had one big breach a year. And then it turned to one big breach every 6 months, and then every quarter, and then every month. And now we're on the breach of the day. There's almost like not a day you don't read the newspaper about another hack breach. It just now happens again and again and again. So I think until we sustain enough pain as a society, we will not take action. Unfortunately, people buy insurance after the flood, if you know what I mean. But when things will start getting better, I do think that the next generation of cyber warriors and even entrepreneurs and CEOs who have grown with the internet and understand what it means to be protected will insist that it's not like some budget that we maybe approve for the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer. It's almost like table stakes. If you want to operate a website or an app or anything like that, if you don't have good security, it will probably fail, or you'll have a brand damage because your customers will not trust you. So I do think at the end that will change. Technologically, I think blockchain has a very great possibility of changing how we think about data. It's not going to solve everything, but it will help us in some use cases. And at the end of all that in technology, I think that I can't think for a second, but all the things that computing will do 20 years from now will change how we think about cryptography. And the reason is it's just how we think about the problem today is limited to the CPU power and the computational power we're used to. But with quantum computing, all these things will potentially, note I said potentially, go out the door.
Right. Here's a very personal question. What do you wake up in the morning worrying about?
I'll answer it differently. Why do I lose sleep over at night? Wow, that's a great question. I think about my kids a lot. One of them is 18, is about to start his college journey, and my daughter is 14. And even before COVID, I can just see how they run their lives. And it's not that I'm worried about it, but I'm constantly thinking about what does it really mean on the grander picture. I'll give you an example. I grew up loving movies. I loved going to the theater to watch a movie. I'm not going to do a show by hand. How many of you love movies? But my kids are with a generation that is not interested in movies. The attention span beyond 10 minutes is just not there. I'll give you another example. I couldn't wait to learn how to drive so I can have the freedom of driving. I have an 18-year-old who I had to beg to learn how to drive because for him, freedom did not come from driving a car, but it's from having the Uber app. So I think the internet and how we run our lives is changing in a way that may not be well understood by all the generations we have now with us. And I don't know what is the meaning of those generational changes of, you know, just using text and emojis instead of having real human relationships. That's the one thing that I constantly think about. What does it really mean? And of course, in cybersecurity, it means how easy can you fool people to give their bank account information through these things. Other than that, I just hope we find a cure very soon for this pandemic so we can go back to something we will call the new normal.
Right. And this is kind of the inverse of that question. What makes you hopeful about the future of our planet and our society?
The generations after us are way more woke. Sorry, I had to use that. I think the changes we see, all the way to changes in the street, I don't want to sound political, but just to show how social media can get 1 million people together, where 50 years ago it was just hard to do, impossible to do. I think the movement of real change, whether it's about ecology or human rights or anything else like that, is giving me a lot of hope that we now have the ability to have the voice of the people be heard and change lives. I do think things will get better. There's no doubt in my mind. The next generation is just giving me a lot of hope of what can be done.
You contribute significant resources to Thorn, a group focused on eliminating child sex trafficking. Is Thorn having an impact?
Absolutely. When I sold 41st Parameter, I went to volunteer at the DHS, specifically with the unit that helps catch perpetrators, because I'm using all my computing knowledge, cybersecurity knowledge, and so forth to put the bad guys behind bars. There's no better sport. When I've learned about what Thorn is doing, it was started by Demi Moore and Ashton Kutcher, and the resources they get with NECMEC, which is the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children, and the support from Silicon Valley, you know, the companies that actually host the data and can help fight it, I decided to go help, both with my time and advice and money. I will tell you, if you go to their website, it's called wearethorn.org, you will see on a daily basis the impact, how many thousands of children were rescued from the claws of evil. There's no other ways to think about it, as a result of machine learning, data mining, doing spidering technology and all kinds of stuff like that on the dark web. But it absolutely works. It's not just a fantasy or wishy-washy thing. I would absolutely encourage you to donate and think about them in your prayers, because they make real change in the world.
Thank you. This is another very timely question. As a first-generation immigrant, what do you think was your biggest contribution to the American business landscape? And was there a particular experience that comes to mind where you benefited from being an immigrant that perhaps someone who was born and raised here might have missed?
It's a very good question. I'll go back to my kids who were born here. They have no other frame of reference, and I can see the difference. I can see it. When I went to MSU, it was by having 4 jobs to be able to support going to school, and maybe sleeping 2 or 3 or 4 hours a night on the average, until my body collapsed. That also happened. But my kids will never ever live alone in a city across the ocean trying to support them. They just won't have that frame of reference. And I think for a lot of us who were born here, we just don't understand what it means to be in a house without hot water. It's just like, you don't even think about it. Or I'll move my screen again. You see these soccer balls behind me? It's a constant reminder. How many soccer balls and basketballs you had as a kid? You can't even count. Think about the kids who grew up without a single one. Like, there's such a disparity in opportunity. Being an immigrant is an absolute advantage here, just because you don't take any of this for granted. Don't get me wrong. I do think a lot of people here are amazing and they're talented. They can do wonderful things. But I would challenge you to go live 1 month anywhere. It actually could be Europe. I'm not saying Africa or third. I'm not even saying that, which will give you a whole lot of different perspective. When I was an executive at American Express, I was forced to work in India because my team was there. And I've learned more from that experience than any meeting in a posh office in the United States, because I understood that the 10 employees I have there, not all of them are from the same caste. So while I write an email to all of them and I don't even think about it, 2 of them cannot sit for lunch with the other guys. I mean, things like this is what should open our minds to what can happen. As an immigrant, I'm just more sensitive to it, and I can understand how great America is. I think my contribution is very simple. Just by lending a hand to this amazing experiment we call America is just like everybody else. That's my contribution. Nothing more, nothing less. And I do hope as a country, we will realize people who are willing to leave their family and culture and all they know to come make this experiment better, for the most part, should be welcomed in. That's it. It's never going to be easy for anybody.
And here's a question I thought someone might ask you. What is your view on how voting should happen?
I'm simple-minded about it. Voting was not invented by us. It was invented in Greece. The original one was 2 buckets, and you could either pick a white stone or a black stone, and you would put a rock in. I think we should go back to that. It's that simple. I don't think taking 17th century, electoral college idea with the thought about how people are or aren't should dictate our future. I think majority votes is such a simple concept. It is practiced in many countries around the world. I think that's the first thing. If I could have a magic wand, I would change. And the second thing is, I wish that we would fix the internet to a point that we can have trust in it and we can vote online, because it will further expand who all can vote, especially in a time of a pandemic, right? But I know we are years ahead of that happening.
Interesting. Another Trusona question. Your last major round of funding took place 3 years ago. Are you preparing for an IPO?
That's a great question. I can't answer it even if I was. There's a thing called the silent period, but not yet. And definitely anybody who IPOs now during a pandemic is a very brave soul. The markets are extremely unpredictable these days. I think the future of Trusona is not to IPO, though. It will probably get acquired by one of the big guys. We already have investors such as Microsoft and Akamai, and if you kind of know what that means and why they want to have their finger in the cookie jar, it probably tells the way Trusona will end.
Interesting. Here's a kind of a personal question. The writer asks, I'm currently working in an IT company, but in the finance department. How would you suggest I can gain the trust of my employer to let me move into a different department?
Best question so far. Let's talk about it. First, aim, have a direction, say what you want to have happened, because then, I know it sounds crazy, but the universe will help you get there, right? In mysterious ways. But if you're aimless, you don't know if you have arrived or not. So to whoever asked the question, say that you wanted to move from just being in the finance department to be an actual rep or a consultant or somebody in the security center. Go to the leader of that department and just use simple English words. Say, I see myself 5 years from now doing this. Could you please show me the ropes? Could you please mentor me? Could you please train me? Tell me what to read, what to do. Can I help you for free? I don't want anything. I don't want to raise. I just want to do the things that will allow me to end up there. I can tell you many times in life, that's all I needed to say to start a relationship that could lead there. But you have to aim, say where you want to be, and go talk to the people who can pull you in there. Sitting in the room just thinking about it will surely not get you there.
Right. And this question, I don't know. On encryption and privacy ownership, will we never have real privacy when governments and corporations are allowed to track everything we do? That's a big question.
And unfortunately, the answer is yes. And let's just be honest about it. Many people say they want privacy, and yet they show the world what they had for dinner last night and where and with whom on social media. So I just want you to see the dichotomy of We say we want something, but we don't really want it, do we? A lot of people say, I want to be secure, but when I ask them to do the most minimum thing of downloading an app to be secure, say, no, I don't really want another app on my phone. There's a famous cartoon that shows a person with a megaphone in front of a crowd and say, what do we want? And the crowd says change. And when do we want it? Now. And the third question, who is willing to change? And there's crickets. So I'll just say, as long as we have corporations, we all know who they are, who hold the data, and the whole business model of them selling the data, the word privacy should not even be uttered by us, because we have agreed to not pay for these services, and in return we become the product. It is what it is. If we want to turn it, and there are some startups who are saying, hey, let me create a wallet where you own your data and you release it every time, then you own it, and the company should give you a $5 coupon or give you money or micropayments for that. Only then we can turn the business model to, I own it, I know where my data is, and I release it when I want to. But we also need to remember that it will only be effective 50 years from now. Why? Because most people who are alive now, their data is somewhere in the database. So you can't, the cat is out of the bag. But in the future, we might get there. But I don't see it happening anytime soon.
Okay, and this is our last question. If you were graduating from college or graduate school today, knowing what you know now, what would be your strategy for positioning yourself for opportunities?
I have the entrepreneurial bug. I'm not going to lie. My wife still asks me, why do you do this to yourself? I tried not to do it or work in a big company, and it's just not my vibe there. I admit it. I like a little bit the unknown. So that is what I would say to myself. I would go look for an opportunity. In my lecture at MSU, when I was there about 6 months ago, I shared with the student a 6-word line that still guides me, which is find a need and fill it. So if you're hearing these words, just think about that sentence. Go find something the world needs and you love doing, and that will be your opportunity. But for me, in these days, I would even go to either biomedical space if I would just start now. I would go into cybersecurity, which I think will grow, and anything with data mining, data scientists, AI, ML, like AI and machine learning, I think booming opportunities that in the next 10 years will become the backbone of every business in the world.
Great. Thank you, Ori. I'm going to turn this back over to Nicole Capel, and we'll say our thanks.
Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate everyone coming tonight. Ori, it's really been an incredible way for us to spend the past hour. Your advice is, the career advice has been sage advice. Your insights and recommendations on how we all could be very intentional in our efforts to succeed. As Betsy mentioned, some of your advice, from the beginning did almost sound a little counterintuitive. But as you presented it and explained it, it really did make sense and kind of got us to think. I think this, as I said, was a great way that we spent our hour, and it certainly made us smarter. And I think you gave us a lot of the great advice to make sure that we stay happy, and by being happy, also being successful. At this point, I'm going to ask Roger, if you could put up the screen. I'd like to take an additional moment just to give a little bit of a plug for some of our upcoming speakers that we have. If you look here, please save the dates. If you notice, as we mentioned in the beginning of the presentation this evening, our virtual executive speaker is going to be a monthly event, and judging from the number of people here tonight and what we've had even at our previous event, we think that these are really timely and a great way to be able to continue our traditions of having executive speakers. So please mark the following dates and notice the interesting and exciting speakers that we have lined up. So at this point, we'll see you hopefully, if not before, at least virtually on Thursday, August 13th, when we're going to hear it from from our Chief People Officer at WeWork will certainly have quite a bit to say. So at this point, again, I'd like to thank Ori Eisen for doing an amazing presentation and thank everyone for joining us this evening. Have a great rest of the week. Enjoy your summer, and thanks again for coming. Take care.